Hello again, welcome to Spotlight, a glow of colour in a black and white world.
Spotlight, brought to you by the Isle of Man Arts Council.
This evening we speak to Island anaesthetist turned author Keith Wilkinson about the pleasures and perils of writing and publishing your work. And we catch up with the happenings and fundings of the Isle of Man Arts Council, plus a bit of music from a forthcoming album by local muso Steve Nash. As always, do get in touch with any creative artistic endeavours you may be involved in, planning, hoping to create, or would really like to put in that spotlight. This spotlight, the spotlight, the programme on Manx Radio. Poetic, visual, theatrical, musical, literary, mime, or anything else. Just email me spotlight@manxradio.com, or if you prefer, Howard Kane at manxradio.com, Kane with an E, and please do make use of it. So, if in doubt, read. That could be a good metaphor for a healthy life. It also, as it happens, is an instruction, as If in Doubt was the title of a book published last year by retired anaesthetist Dr. Keith Wilkinson. Keith spent 4 decades working in this most critical and responsible of medical specialisms, 30 of those years here on the Isle of Man. After retiring, he filled in what must have been lots of empty hours by writing, amongst other things. He did a true crime book, Manx Murders, in 2003. I'm glad he did that after he retired. And then a book detailing in absorbing, sometimes funny and a very frank manner, the intricacies of a job which, unlike so many of our jobs, mine included in particular, one mistake can make the difference between life and death, rather than one angry listener in my case. Keith dropped by recently to talk about how the book had been received, how it came about, the writing process, and whether he would be tempted, as one reviewer had suggested, to put pen to paper again for another volume.
Well, I'd thought about it for a while. I wrote the other book, the Manx Murders book, years ago, but I had thought about writing another book. And then Peter Duffy, who's a urologist at the hospital, had a book published, which I read maybe 6-8 months before I retired. And that was one thing that made me think maybe I should try and write my book. So I started about 3 months before I retired, and I thought it would be a way of kind of easing into retirement, give me something to do for the first few months. And then I started and stopped and started again, and eventually after about probably a year and a half, I finished it. But I thought I would try and make it interesting to not only doctors, anaesthetists, operating theatre staff, but to the general public who might be interested in hearing about what an anaesthetist does.
And was your aim to sort of to I don't know, make it as realistic as possible, or to look at the quirkier side of it, or sort of make it more glamorous, or did you have a particular sort of view of how you're going to actually colour it? No,
not really. I tried to make it just give a kind of broad overview of what an anaesthetist does. Our job as anaesthetists on the island is slightly different to other anaesthetists because we have to do a little bit of everything. So I tried to get that across in the book. So I talked about, work in the intensive care unit, transferring patients over to Liverpool in a plane, and a bit about the trauma in the TT and the Grand Prix and so on. So I tried to just give an overview of what an anaesthetist does, but one of the most difficult things was to get the medical procedures described in a way that anyone could understand it. So that was one of the difficult things. But I tried to make it, I hope, interesting and fairly easy read for anyone. But no, I didn't have any particular plan about how to look at the quirky side of the job. But I've tried to put a few funny little anecdotes in, and so some of it's a bit light-hearted, I guess. But the overall thing is quite serious, obviously.
Yeah. But when you say it was a book aimed at everyone, not just at medical professionals.
Yeah, that's what I tried to do.
Yeah.
I tried to get, some of my friends in the pub have read it, and they said, "Oh, I really enjoyed it." And I said, "Did you understand all the?" And they said, "Well, once or twice, wasn't quite sure." But in general, they seem to understand the kind of procedures. And I went to my daughters, my friends, and said, "Can you just read that and see if you understand it?" And then they would come back and say, "Well, I didn't get this bit." So I'd go back and try and reword it. So I've tried to make, but if you do that, if you overdo that, then other anaesthetists or other doctors, nurses might think, "Oh, this is like, I'm not very happy about this." So you've got to try and keep a happy medium, I guess. And I hope I've managed to do that.
And how did you find the writing process? Because obviously it's one thing coming from spending 30, 40 years of working life as a professional medic and then going to actually sort of writing a book. I mean, I'm sure you were writing obviously as a medic as well, but a very different skill set to actually come up with a book like this. Was it an easy swap? Did you find the process enjoyable, hard work, nightmarish?
Well, it was all of those, I think. But with having written the other book and spent about a year writing that one, I had some experience of of writing, but it would come in fits and starts. So I'd get all enthusiastic and write. I remember in one fortnight I wrote like 40,000 words, which was like half of the book I was aiming for in terms of length. And then I did nothing for 6 months, like lost interest in it completely. And then I went back and did. So that was one thing. It was it wasn't a constant thing, every day. But my daughter's an English teacher, QE2, and she helped me a lot with parts of it in terms of giving advice on whether I should include bits and how I should word them. So that was nice having her to help me. But yeah, I think because I've been reading books, mainly true crime books since I was 10 or 11. So I've read like thousands of books, obviously, and I think writing the other book helped. And I tried to write another book about a man who'd been on death row for 23 years, and that's all those things helped, I think. And writing about my career, about the work I've been doing for the last 37 years as an anaesthetist was. That was a lot easier than writing about some of the other things I wrote about in the first book, in the Manx Murders book. So that's it. It wasn't a constant thing. It came and went, and I lost interest, and then I got all enthusiastic again. And then eventually I got to the stage where I thought, look, I've got to finish it now. I'm nearly there, And eventually I finished it. But
what about the publishing process? Because again, it's one thing actually getting the words down, but then sort of getting them edited, then finding someone who's interested in taking it on. And I know some people now sort of self-publish as well. But was it difficult getting it out? Because it's been on the shelf for a while. It's been out there. You've been getting responses to it. Was it actually difficult to get someone to actually bring it out in proper, lovely, beautifully produced paperback form?
Well, I didn't try to get a traditional publisher for this one. I didn't even try because I knew I wouldn't be able to get anybody. It's nearly impossible to get a good publisher to publish anything. So I didn't really try that. So I spent a few weeks or a couple of months researching how you could get it, how you self-publish it through a self-publishing company. So basically you have to pay them, you have to put money up front, but they help to edit the book, copy edit the book, proofread it, make suggestions for the cover, and then they print it and distribute it, and they give it a bit of publicity when it comes out, and then you get royalties from them in the way you do from a traditional publisher. So that's how I did this one, but the next thing was, deciding to pay that money and get it done. I paid extra for the cover. I wanted a particular cover, so I had to pay extra money for that. The price I paid at first included a cover of one of their covers from a stock photograph. So that was that. But so eventually, once I got the thing published, the next thing was trying to publicise it, which I did, and had a little interview here with Christy, as you know, and then I got some things in the papers and that sort of thing. But what I'm trying to do now is get a bit more publicity in the UK, because it's not a Manx book. It's just a book for anyone interested. Reader. So I've got a couple of press releases written, one by the publisher and one by a company that does press releases for people like me, and I've paid for those. So I'm hoping to get a little bit of publicity in the UK, in England and elsewhere. So that's the latest thing. But over here, I'm getting some nice little feedback from people, which people stop me and say they enjoyed it. So in general, I think I'm quite pleased with the response it's had.
And a couple of quotes from it, I must admit. There's one I thought, I've written a script there, I think there's hope for us all, because you say, and you describe in the book how you actually, you didn't sort of sail through straight A pluses all the way through and breeze in. You said it was actually rather hard work getting on with your A-levels, but you suddenly decided overnight, right, I'm actually going to pull my finger out and start working. And, here you are 40 years later, having had a career in medicine and now a published author as well. So, like I said, I took hope from that. You think anyone sort of reading this thinking, you know what, it's never too late just to knuckle down and say, get on with it and do it.
Yeah, the first chapter is called Crossroads, and that's from a comment on my school report at the end of the first term at A level. And I dug the report out about a month ago, And I've got it on a little kind of PowerPoint that I've given to a few people, even a few talks. I've got some talks lined up with WI and Rotary and things. But I gave a talk to U3A, and they all had a good laugh at that report, because my form teacher, he said, you basically your standard is so poor, standard work so poor that you've now reached a crossroads. And then he said, but with your present attitude towards work, you haven't got a hope for success at A level. And that's what I did. I pulled my finger out and knuckled down after that.
That sort of shocked you into action.
It did, really.
Yeah. And another line that caught my eye as well in some of the reviews was that it's talking about the glory days when proper anaesthetics were given. What's that mean then? I don't want to give too much away, because people need to read the book. But
well, this was a review by a consultant who was just slightly younger than me in one of the medical journals, Journal of Anaesthetic Practice. And I think what he means was when I started, there wasn't a lot of monitoring equipment. So you've got pulse oximeters, which anyone can buy for like £10 now. In those days, there weren't any. And then after about 3 years, they came along, and then we had like one oximeter for 10 operating theatres. And then eventually it gets to now where you would never dream of giving an anaesthetic without a pulse oximeter. That's one thing. But the other thing was hanging on to face masks. We'd hang on to a face mask for hours and hours. And at Alder Hay Hospital, when I was there, for example, you would never put a child on a ventilator, a breathing machine. You'd ventilate them by hand for 6-8 hours. So I think that's what he's getting at. But nowadays, it's a lot easier because you have different types of airways. You can just put an airway in, then your hands are freed up. So I think that's what he meant, really. It was more hands-on then. Now, literally, you put the patient to sleep, get the airway sorted out, and your hands are freed up, and you never need to touch the patient again. But we were constantly close to them because we were hanging on to a face mask. That's what he was getting at, I think.
It's a great read. Now, I suppose, again, one thing to say, where can people get it? Is it available, as they say, in all good bookshops online, or where's the best place?
It's available in Bridge Books, in Ramsey and Port Erin, and mostly Manx, the shop in Douglas. She's taken some books. And the book company, he's going to take a few books. And I think that's pretty much it at the moment on the island. But it's available from Amazon as a book and an e-book. So there's a link online for that, obviously. It's $8.99 for the book. For the book, and $4.99 for the e-book from Amazon.
One question we must ask as well is, like you say, it wasn't your first outing. You'd already done your crime book as well. And this harks back to what you also mentioned, that if you hadn't gone into medicine, you might well have been interested in becoming a barrister in criminal law. So do you feel, again, having considered law and becoming a barrister, having actually gone into medicine, having sort of swapped over in later life and gone into writing a bit, do you think there's another book in you, whether that's within law or medicine, or indeed maybe a bit of both, or possibly into something in the world of fiction or whatever? Do you feel you've got another book, or do you think, having dipped your toe thus far, you're thinking, well, that's it for now? No,
I think that's it. I mean, like finishing my job on the last day, which I've said I'm finished with anaesthetics, and in spite of a few people saying, you need to come back and I never did. And I think with this, I've said I don't really think there's nothing else I want to write about. That's the problem. If in doubt, still available. It's a fascinating read and a real eye-opener.
Spotlight, brought to you by the Isle of Man Arts Council.
Now, eagle-eared. Can you be eagle-eared? No, I don't see why not. Eagle-eared listeners will be aware that this show is sponsored by the Isle of Man Arts Council, and as we draw towards the end of another year, I thought it might be a good time to catch up with their artistic months over the summer and autumn, and also some new funding opportunities which caught my eye, announced a few weeks back. So I dropped by to the HQ down in the Villa Arcade for a chat with Arts Development Manager Jane Corkill. Actually, Jane, this was something that's popped up a bit earlier in the year, but we haven't actually had a chance with one thing or another to mention it here on Spotlight, and this is the 50k Creative Industries Fund for Innovation. This was announced, I think, back in September. That's still ongoing?
Yes, absolutely. This was a new funding stream that the Arts Council members have brought online. Actually, it's come about from the COVID lockdown. During COVID, the Arts Council had a fund, COVID resilience funding, which we offered to creatives in the community who'd had to change their offering given the situation. And what that showed the council was that there was actually a demand within the community within our creative industries where people need that. I would hesitate to call it seed funding, but just that small amount that maybe enables them to buy materials or a computer or something that they need in order to get their creative industry, their creative, whatever they're doing creatively, actually out there as something commercial. Because a lot of these creatives, they do want to take that step to perhaps sell their artwork or produce a book, something like that, but they don't actually have the amount of money just readily available to do that. So the Arts Council have come up with a fund, and it is to provide targeted support for this, expressly for this purpose. It's a £5,000 one-time grant. So for creatives who are looking to, expand what they're doing, take the next step, start their journey on that way, then they can come to us, and they can claim 100% of eligible costs up to a maximum of £5,000. So it's brand new. It's just come online. The funding round that we had in October, we had our first couple of applicants there. But hopefully these things sometimes take a little, 6 months or so to for people to kind of realise that they're there and that they can apply. So we're very keen to hear from people that would like to have a chat to us about whether this is something that they can apply to.
And is this separate to the sort of general round of funding that I know the Arts Council support throughout the year?
Well, we have several funding rounds over the course of the year, and within the funding rounds, when the applications are open, you can apply for an underwrite, or you can apply for just a general grant, travel grants. We now have the film funding online and the creative industries funding as well. So you can apply for whichever particular funding stream applies to you and whatever you're doing.
So where are we in the cycle with the rest of the funding rounds?
Yes, the funding is open. The next funding round for the council is the 9th of December. So the current applications will close on the 25th of November. So you simply go online to our lovely website, which is iomarts.com. And that will guide you there to the funding page, and you can have a look at that. And obviously, if you've got any questions, you can just give us a call on 694 or email us. You can email us via the website, contact us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, carrier pigeon.
It's an easy enough process then. It's just a case of knowing you're there to be contacted.
Absolutely. It's a really easy process. And as a team, we're always really happy to talk to applicants or people who think that they may fit into the Arts Council funding. We have people ringing up saying, I've got this idea, I'm not sure. And there's nothing we like better than to meet with people, to have a chat and to find out just how the Arts Council funding may help them. People come to us sometimes with one idea, and then by the time we've all sat and had a chat and talked it through, we've perhaps worked out exactly how and is the best way for them to move forward. Often, so for example, the underwrites are for events where people are making an income, so in effect anything that's ticketed. People sometimes will come and ask us about a grant or a travel grant to bring somebody over for an event, when actually they're best suited for the underwrite. So the best thing is for people to just give us a shout, and we're based here in the Villa Marina Arcade. People can just stick their head in the door and
drop in.
Yes.
Have a chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And while we're here, because we haven't had a chat for a while, coming towards the end of the calendar year, in late October, November now as we're speaking, a busy year, and is this where the sort of planning starts for next year, or is that already taken care of?
Well, it's always busy, and we have had a very busy year. We're still slightly recovering from Louis Theroux being over.
Terrific.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Absolutely packed.
Absolutely packed. Every single seat, it sold out in about 12 minutes, and he was an absolute joy to have over. He was
I know
just
Christy's
a
still
lovely guest.
talking about it. I know she did a wonderful job, and I think it's been the highlights of her life in recent years.
Well, yeah, he was terrific. So that was really busy. And the week before we had Louis here, we had a quintet over from the Royal Northern College of Music, who were in the schools. They were playing Peter and the Wolf to all the Year 1 children around the Island primaries. So that was a busy week. We've obviously had the Halle Orchestra over this year. We have brass band seasons. We have all manner of things that go on. So we've just finally got to the point, I think, where we're sort of catching our breath. But we have got an Arts Council strategy meeting coming up next week. And we're already looking at potential guests for next year's lecture. I think Louis will be a hard act to follow, but nevertheless, we will do our best. And other plans for the next year. So it's always ongoing. There's always things going on. But right now, it's nice and quiet.
There's always something going on down at the Arts Council, even when, as it's claimed by Jane, it's quiet. That email again to get in contact, iomartscouncil@gov.im. Some music. If you're a fan of the vibrant local music scene, then you probably already tune into the Live Lounge here on Manx Radio 5 to 7 on Saturday evenings with Christy DeHaven. If not, why not? Where the equally vibrant Christy has all manner of live guests in her studio, all prominent on the local scene, oft further abroad and usually loaded with musical instruments for a live number or two crammed into the studio. Last week, Steve Nash and company joined her for a chat and some music. And we also had a sneak preview of the forthcoming album, whose title alone caught my ear. Without the grape, there is no wine. Here he is with Games.
Feeling like a jigsaw pieces falling from the box, a puzzle somewhere incomplete, hid away up in the loft. We all need help to climb sometimes, we all need help to stand, like paper clips or ring binders held together by elastic bands. When it all just falls apart, you can piece it back together. When the sun makes way for rain, they learn to change the weather. Without the rain, the clouds won't leave. Without the wind, the trees won't lean. Without the moon, the stars won't shine. Without the grape, there is no wine. We all need help to smile sometimes, we all need help to breathe. When birds light up the morning song, suddenly the bad times leave. Feeling like a game of chess, life somehow seems to be a mess. You are the king, you are the queen, your life is your magazine. When it all just falls apart, you can piece it back together. When the sun makes way for rain, they learn to change the weather. Without the rain, the clouds won't leave. Without the wind, the trees won't lean. Without the moon, the stars won't shine. Without the grape, there is no wine. Without the moon, the stars won't shine. Without the grape, there is no wine.
That's about it for this week. Don't forget, if you want to hear anything again, go to manxradio.com, download the Spotlight podcast, listen where you want. Why not try it whilst making your Christmas pudding? It is that time of year. We'll be back next week, when we'll be catching up, hopefully, with local poet Annie Kizik, who has a new book out. Mind how you go, stay creative, and I'll see you then. Cheerio.